All then. Welcome to the first podcast produced as part of the Erasmus Plus project entitled with the acronym MicroWeave-TEX, which focuses on acquiring and sharing knowledge about the release of microplastics and microfibers from textile products, as well as their impact on the environment, surroundings and people. This podcast serves as educational material for students, but also for teachers who wish to broaden their knowledge about microplastics. The project is being carried out with partners. Lodz University of Technology, Faculty of Textile Engineering and Design, is one of the partners, cooperating with universities from Spain, Greece and Lithuania, as well as with a Greek company. In today's episode, we'll be talking about how the textile company Biliński is counteracting the release of microplastics during finishing processes. Our guest is Professor Lucyna Bilińska, who will share her insights and experience in this area. Good morning, Miss Lucyna.
Good morning, Professor.
First of all, I would like to ask you to introduce yourself briefly and, above all, to tell us about the Biliński Company from Konstantinov Lodz, which is a world-renowned finishing plant.
Thank you for that brief introduction. I would like to say that I am the head of the Research and Development Department at the Biliński Company. Biliński is a dye house, which means it specialises in finishing, dyeing and printing knitted and woven fabrics, mainly in width. Our customers, in other words our clients, are mainly business entities, so it is a B2B operation. By this, we mean that knitters and weavers bring us raw textile materials, and according to their order, we give them the appropriate colour or print, the right finish, and then such a finished product is collected by the business client, and from it later things like clothing are made, or specialist products such as, for example, uniforms, or also agro-textiles, or some special production such as soundproof linings for Boeing cabins. So the scope of our company's operations is quite broad. Our clients also come from various countries, mainly European, not only Polish clients, so the quality requirements for our production are also quite high.
And since high quality is required, I assume that you have a suitably modern machine park. Could you say a few words about the modern technologies used in your company?
Exactly right. Mainly clients from Scandinavian countries place emphasis on sustainable development, on the circular economy, and on various certificates attesting to environmentally friendly production. We are adapting our machinery to the level of innovation currently expected on the market. So we have the latest machines, mainly dyeing machines and stabilisers for finishing. At the moment, we are also replacing about a third of our machinery and the older type of dyeing machines, which operate with what is called a high liquor ratio, meaning they use a large amount of water, are being replaced with newer machines. These use much, much less water in order to generate the smallest possible amount of wastewater. And overall, our activities are focused on being as environmentally friendly as possible.
And here, from your experience in these finishing processes, dyeing, printing, surely there is a lot of microplastics or microfibers released during these processes, isn't there? And in which processes have you observed the most release of these microfibers?
Perhaps we should start from the beginning. What was the reason that as a company we became interested in the problem of microplastics? What prompted us to try to reduce these emissions? Of course, it's clear that our own observations were the main reason. So as we carry out our production processes, there is a lot of this waste in the form of fibres. So we simply have waste which costs money. Another factor was also the data that was and still is widely available, whether on the internet or in various media. The data is reliable because it is data that was already made public in 2019 by the European Union Environmental Protection Agency, and it concerned specifically the emission of microfibers from textile products. And it turned out that up to 500,000 tonnes of these microfibers could be emitted per year. And this source is only a source that covers the washing of textile products. So these studies are very narrow in scope, aren't they? And these studies did not in any way include sources that may occur in industrial processes. And that was another reason to take an interest in this topic. Next, we started looking for ready-made formulas that someone could propose to us. What can be done to emit less microplastic, or even to be able to measure how much microplastic is being produced and what can be done with it afterwards? And it turned out that this path is not so easy because the measures currently proposed by European Union legislation are at a very basic level. So it has been proposed. Such a zero waste regulation, which was published about 2 years ago, where the European Union presented the latest data on microplastics, the sources of microplastics. So in a broader context, not only the textile ones, but it also focused specifically on textile microplastics and proposed certain measures aimed at better labelling of textile products, an emphasis on better describing textile products in terms of their composition and the possible presence of synthetic fibres. There was also a focus on possible ways of proposing to us as manufacturers of textile products how the amount of this microplastic could be measured. And it turned out that as a result of these actions initiated by the European Union, this issue or this matter was referred to ISO, that is the International Organization for Standardization. And it turns out that this body is essentially a dedicated organisation that really does have the tools to propose something ready-made to us, some ready-made regulation. And it turns out that such a set of standards for actually measuring the amount of this microplastic has been developed. And first, there was this report which told us how much of this microplastic is being produced. It allowed us to determine the quantities, that is, to classify the appropriate quality classes of this microplastic, and to provide us with methods for how this microplastic can be measured in terms of quantity, but also in terms of quality. And in our company, we decided to see how this set of standards could be implemented in industrial operations and whether it would be an easy or a difficult task for us. And it turned out that this task is not quite so easy. And in addition, perhaps the people who created this set of standards or this legislation, and those who in the European Union were responsible for estimating the amount of textile microplastics, did not fully have the knowledge that would have allowed them to propose appropriate methods.
Exactly, but I take it the company has its own methods, as in refining them. Because as part of like on the company's website, there is a statement saying that it was the first in its industry in the world to implement a comprehensive process water recycling system, which is also linked to reducing microplastics.
Exactly right. Only the action is much broader. That's because, as we know, microplastics are just one type of pollution found in textile wastewater. Another, more noticeable one is the colour coming from dyes. And this whole comprehensive system for wastewater treatment and recycling is more complex and has been developed in our company for several years now, and it thoroughly purifies the wastewater to such a level that it can be reused. At the moment, we are recycling about 50% of this wastewater, which in practice means that over the course of a day, this amounts to more than 1,000 cubic meters, so quite a lot.
Quite a lot.
And microplastics are a very specific aspect of this problem and also require a special approach because at the moment there isn't any really tried and tested method for stopping microplastics, for limiting their formation, or for dealing with the microplastics that have already been captured. There is also no method, nor have there been any studies so far, carried out on an industrial scale that would tell us how much microplastic there actually is. And now perhaps I'll go back for a moment to those standards, which have been proposed to us by ISO. They have the code 4484. These are a series of standards for textiles, microplastics of textile origin. These are standards which consist of 3 parts, and they give us the possibility, the tools, to see how much microplastic is being released. But watch out, in the first part, microplastics released from washing textile products are described. So it's not exactly a methodology dedicated to industrial activity, because those are different conditions. In the second part of this standard, we are given the possibility to apply appropriate methodologies. And there, for example, Raman spectroscopy or infrared spectroscopy or other more complicated methodologies are indicated, which, in my opinion, on an industrial scale, are only possible to implement in a very limited sense. That's because these are complicated and expensive techniques.
But how do you try to measure, or do you try to measure and limit exactly?
In the third part of this standard, a gravimetric method is given, which is the easiest to implement. There, you can wash textiles using a domestic method, capture the microfibers and try to estimate their quantity by weight, then estimate how much of this released microplastic there was in relation to the dry product we started with. And this is a quantitative indicator that allows us to say whether there was less or more microplastic. And we use this weight-based indicator to estimate how much microplastic is actually released during our production processes. And it turns out that there's quite a lot of this microplastic because it came out to about 250 milligrams per kilogram of finished product. So
that's quite a lot.
That's a large amount. So we took action to see what could be done to reduce the amount of microplastic. And we started testing various technological options, including the dosing of chemicals, the amount of water used, and mechanical interactions. And the project was advanced enough that we decided to actually purchase new types of dyeing machines, meaning we made a really large investment running into hundreds of thousands of euros in order to reduce the mechanical factor, which in my opinion is the most significant when it comes to the emission of microplastics from textile products during production processes. And it turns out that when we started comparing the traditional method of dyeing and finishing in relation to microplastics, as I mentioned, it was about 250 milligrams per kilogram. That's the RF indicator, and in the modern technology, we've refined in a state-of-the-art dyeing machine, there was only 16 milligrams of microplastic.
Wow, that's a big difference.
It's a very, very significant reduction, and I think it's actually a real leap forward in terms of emission levels. Well, that's actually an order of magnitude lower, isn't it?
That's fantastic. Congratulations. Because I understand that this reduction in microplastics isn't just about the release of microplastics during the dyeing process, but it will also have an impact later on.
Usability.
On the product's usability. So that's incredible. However, as I understand it, these are major investments, both technological and financial, in order to...
Yes, and a lot of work involves. Above all, a great deal of expertise as well, because we had to involve several people. 5 people worked on this project for 3 months just to carry out some initial research. And an entire team of technical staff who also developed and oversaw this process on the production floor. So really significant efforts have been made here. A large investment of resources, a lot of manpower to genuinely help ensure that these emissions are reduced, to truly make a real contribution. Also in terms of knowledge, right? Or just to see simply how even these ready-made regulations that ISO has served up for us here relate to real production conditions. Because, as I've already mentioned, these standards are designed so that the product is washed in laboratory conditions. We collect the fibres on a filter. And then we weigh those fibres. This has nothing to do with the production process, where in reality we have a huge dyeing machine where hundreds of litres of water circulate in the system of this machine. The mechanical and temperature conditions are completely incomparable, aren't they? So at this moment, no tool has been provided to us as manufacturers to be able to realistically, in a real quick way, estimate the amount of EMI, the level of emissions concerning these microfibers. And there still isn't really that awareness among the authorities of the European Union that this problem should actually be explored from a slightly different angle, that here too the source of emissions is significant, and that globally the contribution from manufactured textiles is certainly significant, but it still haven't been estimated. Because, as I mentioned at the beginning, the European Union's environmental protection agenda estimated this for the washing of textile products, for domestic washing, yes? And we were advised that we should use better filters in our household appliances for washing, meaning in our washing machines.
Well, yes, but it's a bit different when it's something that officials set up without any consultations, perhaps, with companies, isn't it? And that's why, well, the company Biliński from Konstantinov Lodz is a pioneer in taking action and combating the problems of microplastics, reducing pollution and limiting water consumption. In this regard, I'd like to offer my warmest congratulations on the one hand, and sincerely thank you for taking part in today's podcast and for sharing such valuable information. This episode is part of the MicroTEX podcast series developed as part of the Erasmus Plus project, which aims to support sustainable innovation and education in the textile sector. If you would like to find out more about the project, please visit the project's website, microweave-tex.eu. And thank you for listening. And I invite you to follow the next episodes of the MicroTEX podcast series. And thank you, Professor, for your comprehensive news. Thank you.